I think A Tale of Our Time has to have a good narrative, and the principles behind a good narrative are very similar to those of good game design, which is a satisfying mix of randomness and agency.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Tales of Our Times. This is a show where we discuss the stories that move us, what makes them so meaningful, and why others could or should find meaning in them as well. This is not a spoiler-free show, so bear that in mind as you continue to listen. We tackle books, movies, comics, and more. Where there's a story, there's a reason to read or watch. In today's episode, I'm your host, Amanda Stevens, and I'm joined by my guest, Max McCurdy. How are you, Max?
I'm doing fine. As you said, my name is Max McCurdy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm 38 years old.
All right. Is there anything else you'd like to say to introduce yourself?
I'm a resident of Taiwan and a casual movie lover.
Oh, I wouldn't think of you as a casual movie lover. After when you came in here, you were talking about the film theory behind this.
That's sort of my hobby, is theorizing about things in general. So,
do you feel like, is it like one of those things where it's like you know enough to know that you're not a professional?
Probably there's a learning curve at which I realize that I'm never going to be a film buff with a capital B.
Capital F, capital B.
Exactly.
You're a lowercase film
Exactly.
buff.
But I do enjoy films and I enjoy narratives as well. So
Yeah. Well, everyone probably saw it. I think I'm going to be in the minority today discussing today, like the film that you've chosen.
Yes.
Because I haven't seen it, which I think is very unusual. But could you tell us what story have you brought for us today?
So the movie is Pulp Fiction, which for a certain generation was very hard to get away from, either in its references in pop culture or just quotes from people online and in person. It was a force of nature during the 90s and early 2000s.
It's very memeable. But, sorry, I did forget. For anyone who is unfamiliar, the movie is by Quentin Tarantino. It's originally from 1994. And we should probably put a content warning on this episode because the movie itself is quite violent. Anything else?
It has liberal doses of extreme violence, profanity, drug use, sexual situations, and downright dastardliness.
Yeah, it's like a down and nasty movie from the 90s in the era of extreme.
Sure.
Which we've recently been revisiting. So that's
true.
fun.
Yeah.
But that being said, Max, would you give us a summary of Pulp Fiction?
Pulp Fiction is a series of interlocking narratives between various people in the criminal underworld or in the sort of down and out part of society. So it features a pair of hitmen who do various deals around town and kill various people. It features a boxer played by Bruce Willis at the end of his career debating whether to take a dive on his last fight.
Oh.
It features the wife of a drug kingpin who gets into more than she bargained for with one of the hitmen from the previous narrative. It involves...
Is it a romantic situation, or is it like a...
It never develops into a full-blown romance. It's cut short by a drug overdose.
Oh my God. Wait, who? Hers?
Hers, yes.
She dies?
She does not die. She is, in fact, saved.
Oh, good.
And being saved is one of the interesting subcurrents of the movie.
You think it's like a theme, perhaps?
I think it is a theme. Okay. Salvation is definitely a big undercurrent, and one of the reasons why I keep coming back to this movie over time. To finish the summary, there's also a pair of low-level bank robbers who try and rob a restaurant with the aforementioned hitmen also inside at the time.
Oh, this is where the quote comes in that I was talking about, the Samuel L. Jackson one.
Is it able to be quoted on radio?
I don't think so.
Probably not. But so it's all about these different characters and how their lives sort of interlock in a chaotic fashion and how they end up either saving each other, saving themselves, or being condemned in the end.
Okay.
Yeah.
So these stories are all like interconnected in like a really deep way. Do you think that they exist as like smaller separate narratives as well? Or do you think that it's impossible to tell one story without telling the others?
Each story is contained within itself, I would say, but there is a kind of intersection of characters within each of the narratives within the movie, and that intersection is what creates the tension or the climax or the choice.
Do you think that you could tell us, of all those little miniature stories, even another summary of the one that you found most interesting?
So I'm going to cheat a little bit and talk about two of the narratives,
Sure.
but they both play on similar themes. There is a moment in which the two hitmen, played by Samuel Jackson and John Travolta, go to an apartment to make a hit on someone, and the hit is carried out successfully, but there is another person hiding in the bathroom, aligned with the person that they killed, successfully killed, who comes out of the bathroom and point blank fires at them. All of the bullets miss, and the henchman is summarily dispatched at that point. And the debate that ensues between these two hitmen at that point is, was this a random act? Was this a random coincidence, or was this an act of God, a kind of divine intervention? Was the fact that the other henchman missed us, the seeming improbability of that happening,
Of every single bullet
missing every target, they are not hurt at all. Is that a coincidence, or is that providence? Is that a message from the universe? And the two characters have very different interpretations of that, one choosing one path and one choosing the other.
I'm going to guess that they break down along like yes and no.
Basically, yes. One character says it was just a random thing that happens. There's nothing to get too worked up about. It's just the universe has a way of coinciding in weird ways. And the other one, who Samuel Jackson's character, takes this as a message from God, that he is a sign that he is to change his ways and give up the criminal life. And so from that diverging path, their fates are sealed. One survives. Spoiler, but one survives and one does not. And you can guess which one.
Wait, I do want to guess.
Yeah.
I'm going to guess that because it feels like it would be right to be unfair. So does Samuel Jackson die?
He does not.
Oh, good. Okay, that's what I actually wanted to happen.
So it's interesting because it is a somewhat straightforward redemption narrative.
Okay.
And beneath the surface of a lot of the hyper-violence, profanity, and just spectacular extreme nature of the subject matter, there is a kind of conservative and religious redemption narrative that goes on underneath the surface of this movie.
Well, yeah, you said that you feel like an undertone to this is salvation, which is a very religious word.
Right.
So actually, like, maybe we should start to get into that.
Sure.
When I thought about Pulp Fiction, I didn't expect that it was going to be like this. So I'm very surprised that this is actually the narrative of it.
Well, it's very easy to be distracted by the hyper-violence and the kind of the kinetic energy, and the cool.
The Riz.
It exudes this kind of attitude, and it's a brilliant movie for that. But that is a very superficial reading. I think that's, for me, when I saw this movie, I was about 12 years old.
Great. And that's what I wanted to ask you, was when did you first see this?
And it was a rite of passage for me because I went to the video store with a friend of mine, and
who was also 12.
Who was 12, same age as me, and his parents had said, "Don't pick out any movie you like and just bring it to the cashier." And we'll. They didn't check carefully, and so my friend catched this movie and said, "Don't tell mom and dad we're watching this movie." And so it was a kind of risque thing. And the effect of this movie, especially there's the opening theme to it, is this very iconic guitar riff. It reminded me, there was a good quote from Bruce Springsteen. He's talking about Bob Dylan. Yeah. And he said that the effect was like having the door of your mind kicked open.
Is that what you felt?
And that's exactly how I felt about seeing this movie. That the door of my mind had been kicked wide open.
Oh my God.
And it changed. I was obsessed with this movie for a long time, but I was obsessed with it for fairly superficial reasons, befitting of a 12 or 13-year-old, 13-year-old boy who is in love with hyper-violence and all kinds of inappropriate content.
Speaking on that, I'm going to push us forward and ask you, like, personally, what made this movie so meaningful to you, maybe as you grew up? Because you said when you were younger, you were really obsessed with like the superficial aspects of it, which I think as you neatly surmised is very fitting for the age that you originally saw this movie.
For sure. It's a good teenage movie because it is all about underdogs and down and out characters and sort of cultural angst and a little bit like, I think it ties in with my fascination at the time with the Beat Generation writers. I was very interested in Kerouac and Burroughs and these kind of countercultural figures. So it was a kind of counterculture as well.
And for people who are unfamiliar, could you define what you think of as a beat writer?
A beat writer. It was a generation of writers that came to prominence, let's say, in the 50s and 60s, sort of pushing against the perceived dominance of sort of wholesome white America and a kind of progressivism. There was a kind of progressivism that was part of the official discourse, which they pushed against conformism and if we all take our vitamins, we'll all get better thanks to better living through chemistry. They had a different attitude towards what is meaningful, and so they, to greater or lesser success, they wrote a number of novels and poems that express that angst with being against the grain of that era,
being counterculture, so
right? Yeah.
And so then, what meaning do you think that others could find in it? Or rather, what do you think makes this a tale of our time? If you had to narrow it down to just a few things.
I think that there's a lot of different ways to appreciate this movie, which is why it can appeal to anyone who's not too offended by violence and drugs and bad language. But getting past that, the movie itself is quite wholesome, actually.
I guess you said like a lot of the characters end up like making a choice to better themselves and then choosing to walk away from, ironically, the hyperviolence the movie is painted in.
The hitman who rejects divine intervention is killed.
John Travolta.
The hitman who accepts it has an opportunity to prove himself later on. The final diner scene with these low-level crooks. They try to rob the restaurant, and the hitman who has had this conversion moment says, normally, you would be dead by now, but I'm going to save your life. I'm going to buy your life for my salvation. And it's a very explicit move on his part to say, I'm changing my ways. The reason you are able to walk out of here alive is because I've
had a religious epiphany.
And I'm rebalancing my karma. I want to walk the path of the righteous man.
Ooh.
Yeah.
And so you think this movie is a really good depiction of like, well, let's have you soundbite that. You think this movie is a really good depiction of
Well, let's see. I think that to put a subtitle on this movie, the religious references are biblical, but there is a strong interplay of karma and dharma in this movie that I really like.
And dharma is
sort of the righteous path that sets a person out of the cycle of karmic retribution.
Balancing.
It's a way of
it's like
mitigating the karmic cycle in your life.
Yeah, it's like walking the good path, so that you don't have to keep going through the cycle of punishment.
Exactly right.
I got it.
So there's a lot of the causality in the movie is kind of the karmic wheel of just, it seems like random encounters and random things happening, but every action has an equal reaction and everything sort of fits very nicely in the narrative structure. There is also room for agency and choice.
So to tie it back to what you originally said, you think makes something a tale of our time, or a narrative of our time.
Yes.
Would you say that you think this movie is a really good way to show, as a writer, perhaps, like payoff in terms of like someone's actions giving them what they deserve and making that feel good, but also in terms of like a watcher, perhaps seeing a story play out and seeing how your good actions could echo out even in like really horrific ways, and perhaps not in an easy 1 to 2. Congratulations, you're good, but like you can make it better. Like you can make a difference, and it will like make a difference for those around you too. Definitely,
the movie is about characters who make poor choices and the consequences that they bear from those choices. At the end of the movie, though, for many of the characters, there is a moment for a good choice that they make that then sets them on a good path. So there's a common and repeated theme in this movie. So that's why I like it. It's a satisfying and wholesome movie.
I guess it's a wholesome meaning. I don't know if the movie is. Well, actually, that'd be interesting. I'd like to ask a lot of people that. But we are out of time. So I guess I have to ask you my last question, which is if you could give this a one-line subtitle, what would that be?
Sure. It is the Interlocking Paths of Righteous and Unrighteous Men.
Pulp Fiction, the interlocking paths of righteous and unrighteous men.
There you go.
Can we shorten it to the interlocking paths of the righteous and unrighteous?
There you go.
Is that all right?
That's
you don't
perfect.
mind? I love it. I just feel like it really sums up what you were saying. Just like even 1 minute ago. This actually is the evidence of your preparation. When you came in, you told me you had prepared.
I used this as an opportunity to revisit this movie, which I loved. I loved as a young adult, sort of old child. Yeah. And it came back to life in surprising ways for me, watching it again. So I was pretty happy with that.
Good. I'm glad I was able to give you an opportunity to
thank you for this opportunity.
Indulge in one of your favorite movies.
And geeking out about it. Yeah, definitely.
But anyway, tragically, we're all out of time. So,
thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for joining me, Max. And thank you to everyone out there listening for joining us on Radio Taiwan International. This has been Tales of Our Time. I'm your host, Amanda Stevens. And once again, with my excellent guest here today, Max McCurdy. I hope you enjoyed learning about Pulp Fiction from 1994. A story of the righteous
and the unrighteous.
A tale of our time. We'll see you next time.